Now you can deploy your code in Slack with these 3 steps using Sleuth automations and of course Slack. I'll show you how in a minute, but for the impatient, step 1, set up a build that requires an approval step. Step 2, install the Sleuth approval automation and point it at the approval step and a Slack room. Step 3, merge and use. It's that easy. At the end, I'll share a bonus tip where you can safely deploy your code automatically with no manual steps. The State of DevOps report from 2023 talks about how important it is to not only deploy frequently, but have a short change lead time, the time from committed code to deployed. So one of the best ways you can do that is by empowering your developers to ship their own code. Because in my experience, that's the #1 thing you can do to bring your developers into the process and have them feel more ownership of the project. That way they're able to see the results of their change quicker, which makes them want to do more change. But it also allows them to learn from the process and learn from the impact of the deployments so that they'll have more robust code, better features, that kind of thing. So by creating that tight feedback loop, you can get better results. So let's go back to how you would implement developer-driven deployment using Slack. Step 1, set up an approval step in your deployment workflow. What we're looking at here is Circle CI. This is what my team uses to deploy our code, and this is our actual pipeline. If you go to here, you can see the approval step. So what happens is over here, we do all of our checks. So this is our checks, running our tests, doing formatting, building images, creating assets, JavaScript tests, all that sort of thing. Step 2 is we deploy the code to stage. This is where an environment where we can test out the code and see if it's doing what we expect. And then over here is where we actually have the approval step. So what this does is it pauses the pipeline and waits until you manually go in and click the thumbs up to approve it. Once you've approved, then we go to the next step, and that's where it actually deploys to production and deploys some assets and things. So all of it really hinges around this middle step here where we're waiting for an approval. So this, you could stop right here and have a pretty decent workflow. Basically, you would send your Circle CI deployment information into Slack, and then you would know that you're at the approval step, and your developers would go back into Circle CI, go click the approve button, and then wait for the message that it's been deployed to production. That works fine. But we can get even better by putting that approval process itself directly in Slack. And that leads me to step 2, install the Sleuth automation and connect it to your Slack room and your new approval step. So let's go over to Sleuth and let's take a look at not the goals, let's take a look at the automations. Let's go to the automation marketplace. This is where you're going to find new automations to install. The Slack-based deployment approval automation, what it does is it tracks when a deployment has gone to an environment, so let's say staging. Then it will send a message to Slack and say, do you want to promote this to production or not? If you click yes, then it'll go back to that Circle CI approval step that we created earlier, and it will approve it automatically. So the developer can live in Slack and not have to go back to Circle CI. So what happens if we install this? Well, this is where you do the configuration. So in this case, I want this to be triggered when a deployment goes out to staging. Then for our particular code deployment, let's go for our whole application. I want to find a build. And if you remember correctly, it was called test and deploy. Then I need to send a Slack channel, and I'm going to send it to TMP just for the heck of it. So what this is going to do is send a message. Now, I'm not going to already install it because we already have it installed, but I will show you how it looks in Slack. Step 3, use the integration. So over here is the pull request that was merged in, and I already merged it yesterday. So this is actually a real change that we did yesterday. I clicked merge. Now, once that happened, then I go to Slack and I can see the messages start to roll in. So once the code has been deployed to staging, then it tells me about that. It's been deployed to staging. And this is where the automation kicks in. It sends a message to the Slack channel that says, do you want to promote this from staging to production? And I can click approve or reject. And if I click approve, then it goes back to Circle, approves that build, and then once it's deployed to production, it tells me about it in Slack. So as a developer, I live with my code and I live in Slack, which I'm already doing anyways. Now, for a bonus step, what you'll notice in this example is that I didn't actually click the approve button, and yet it was deployed to production. So I pulled this out because I wanted to show you what the buttons look like, but I obviously never clicked it. How did that work? Well, back in the marketplace, there's a set of workflow automations of which the Slack based deployment approvals is one, but there's also auto promote soak deploy if environment is healthy. So we have this automation set up. So once a deploy goes to staging, it sits there for 5 minutes. And what Sleuth does is it tracks the health of that change. And then if it's still healthy after 5 minutes, then it automatically promotes it, clicks the approval, and it goes to production. And that's actually what happened here. So both of these work side by side. You can choose to approve it in Slack, or you can choose to just let it wait. Now, the key part to this is when it is healthy. So this is the deployment as it exists in Sleuth, tracking the staging deploy. So it was deployed to staging. Now, how do we know it was healthy? Well, that's where this section comes in. If you look here, you can see that Sleuth is tracking Sentry. This is kind of a side feature, but we're already in bonus land. But what Sleuth can do is not only track the deployments, but it can track the health of the deployment. So what you're looking at here is you're looking at Sleuth tracking the number of errors in Sentry, and then it's trying to figure out what's normal and what's not. If it's abnormal, then it calls the deployment unhealthy. The reason why that's important is you don't want to be automatically shipping code from staging to production without any kind of health check. So you can choose to have a human do the health check where they look at the graphs, make sure things are healthy, and then manually approve it to production. But another option is to use Sleuth to automatically track the health of that deployment to staging, and after a period of soaking, have it automatically be promoted to production. Different ways to do it. In our case, we actually use both of them, but one or both might be applicable to you.